It was a crisp autumn evening when three friends, Alex, Sam, and Jordan, decided to spend the weekend at an old house on Hollow Hill. The house belonged to Alex's great-uncle, who had passed away years ago, and it had been left abandoned since. The perfect setting for a spooky adventure, they thought, with its creaky floorboards, dusty corners, and stories of hauntings that had circulated for generations. They arrived just before dusk, the setting sun casting long shadows across the overgrown yard. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty, like hollow eyes watching them approach. Alex fumbled with the old, rusty key before finally getting the door open. It groaned on its hinges, and they stepped inside. The air was musty, and the wooden floors creaked under their weight. They set their bags down in the grand foyer, which was adorned with old, faded portraits of stern-looking ancestors. A grand staircase spiraled up to the second floor, and several doorways led off to different parts of the house. "Welcome to Casa de Creepy," Alex said with a grin, trying to lighten the mood. Sam and Jordan laughed, but there was an edge of nervousness in their voices. "Let's get settled in," Sam suggested, "and then we can explore a bit." They chose rooms on the second floor, each one dusty and filled with old, antique furniture covered in white sheets. After unpacking, they met back in the foyer, armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure. "Okay, let's split up and check this place out," Alex said, his flashlight beam sweeping across the darkened hallways. "We'll cover more ground that way." "Are you serious?" Jordan asked, looking uneasy. "Splitting up in a creepy old house? Haven't you seen any horror movies?" Alex laughed. "Come on, it'll be fine. We're just exploring. We'll meet back here in 30 minutes. Reluctantly, they agreed and each chose a different direction to explore. Alex headed down a long hallway to the right, Sam went left towards the kitchen and dining area, and Jordan took the staircase up to the attic. Alex's hallway was lined with more portraits and old, ornate mirrors. He stopped to examine one particularly large mirror, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. As he wiped it away, he saw his reflection staring back at him, but for a split second, he thought he saw a shadowy figure standing behind him. He spun around, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. "Get a grip, Alex," he muttered to himself, continuing down the hall. He reached a door at the end and pushed it open, revealing a small library filled with ancient books. The smell of old paper and leather filled the air. He browsed the shelves, running his fingers along the spines of the books. One book in particular caught his eye. It was an old journal, its cover worn and the pages yellowed with age. Curious, Alex sat down in an old armchair and began to read. The journal belonged to his great-uncle, and it detailed strange occurrences in the house. He wrote about hearing footsteps at night, seeing shadows move on their own, and a feeling of being watched. The last entry was particularly disturbing. It mentioned a presence in the house, something malevolent that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. As Alex read the final words, he felt a chill run down his spine. The room suddenly felt colder, and he had the distinct feeling that he was not alone. He looked up, and for a moment, he thought he saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at him from the dark corner of the room. He blinked, and they were gone. Meanwhile, Sam made his way through the dining room and into the kitchen. The old appliances and countertops were covered in a thick layer of dust, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. He opened a few cabinets, finding nothing but old, rusted utensils and dishes. He moved on to the pantry and found a set of stairs leading down to the basement. His flashlight beam revealed a narrow, steep staircase and a heavy, wooden door at the bottom. Curiosity got the better of him, and he carefully made his way down the stairs, the steps creaking under his weight. The basement was even colder than the rest of the house, and the air was damp and musty. Old, broken furniture and boxes filled with forgotten items were scattered around. As Sam explored, he noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols that looked like they were scratched into the stone. He took out his phone and snapped a few pictures, planning to look them up later. As he was about to leave, he heard a faint sound, like whispering, coming from behind a large, wooden crate. He hesitated, then slowly moved the crate aside, revealing a small, hidden door. The whispering grew louder as he opened the door, revealing a dark, narrow passageway. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing at the end of the passage. He blinked, and it was gone. Shaking, he backed out of the basement and hurried back upstairs, the feeling of unease growing stronger with each step. Jordan climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, each step echoing in the silence. The attic door was old and warped, and it took a few tries before he managed to get it open. The attic was filled with old trunks, broken furniture, and boxes of forgotten memories. He shone his flashlight around, the beam catching dust motes floating in the air. He opened a few trunks, finding old clothes, toys, and photographs. As he moved deeper into the attic, he found an old, full-length mirror covered in a dusty sheet. He pulled the sheet off, revealing a tarnished mirror that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. As he stared at his reflection, he thought he saw movement behind him. He turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. He looked back at the mirror, and his reflection seemed to be smiling, even though he wasn't. Panicking, Jordan backed away, only to trip over an old box and fall to the floor. The mirror wobbled and fell, shattering into pieces. For a moment, he thought he saw faces in the broken shards, twisted and screaming. He scrambled to his feet and ran out of the attic, his heart pounding in his chest. The three friends met back in the foyer, their faces pale and their hands shaking. They shared their experiences, each story more disturbing than the last. The feeling of unease grew as they realized that something was very wrong with the house. "We need to leave," Alex said, his voice trembling. "There's something in this house. We can't stay here." They hurriedly packed their bags and made their way to the front door, only to find it wouldn't open. They tried the windows, but they were all stuck shut. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. As they stood in the foyer, trying to figure out what to do, they heard footsteps coming down the hallway. They turned to see a shadowy figure approaching, its eyes glowing in the darkness. "It's him," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. "The presence my great-uncle wrote about." The figure stopped at the edge of the light, its face obscured by shadows. "You shouldn't have come here," it said in a low, raspy voice. "This house is mine." The friends backed away, their fear growing as the figure stepped into the light. It was a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. "You can't leave," he said, his voice echoing through the house. "You're mine now." They ran up the stairs, their footsteps echoing through the empty house. They tried to find a way out, but every door led to another room, every hallway twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the labyrinthine house. Desperation set in as they realized there was no escape. They found themselves back in the library, the journal lying open on the floor. Alex picked it up, his hands shaking as he read the final entry again. "We have to confront him," he said, his voice steadying. "It's the only way. We have to face him and banish him from this house." The friends gathered their courage and made their way back to the foyer. The shadowy figure was waiting for them, his eyes glowing with malice. "You think you can defeat me?" he hissed. "This house is my domain. You are nothing but intruders." Alex stepped forward, holding the journal in one hand and a flashlight in the other. "We know your secrets," he said, his voice strong. "We know how to banish you." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You know nothing," he said, his form shifting and twisting. "You cannot defeat me." Summoning all their courage, the friends joined hands and began to recite the words from the journal. The air grew cold, and the house seemed to shake as the figure writhed and screamed. "You cannot banish me," he screamed, his voice filled with rage and desperation. But they continued to chant, their voices growing stronger with each word. The figure's form began to dissolve, the shadows retreating as the light from their flashlights grew brighter. With a final, piercing scream, the figure vanished, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The house seemed to sigh, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the evil presence was banished. The front door creaked open, and the friends stumbled out into the cool night air, their hearts pounding and their bodies shaking. They looked back at the house, its windows dark and empty once more. "Let's get out of here," Sam said, his voice hoarse. "And never come back." They piled into the car and drove away, the house on Hollow Hill growing smaller in the rearview mirror. They knew they would never forget this night, and the horrors they had faced. As they drove, Alex glanced back at the house one last time. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing in the window, watching them leave. He blinked, and it was gone. They didn't stop driving until they reached the safety of their homes, vowing never to speak of the events of that night again. But the memory of the house on Hollow Hill, and the malevolent presence they had faced, would haunt them for the rest of their lives.